My guest today is Tim Helms. I met Tim in 2010 in South Georgia when he was director of the SWGRESA, which stands for Southwest Georgia Regional Educational Support Agency. Is that right, Tim?
Well, the S stands for service agency,
Service,
but
service.
same thing too. You could say support. We're a service agency.
There you go. Well, the service we do now is keeping up with each other's grandkids through Facebook. And
There-
welcome, Tim, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Could you explain what a RESA is for people that don't know and
Yeah,
what their purpose is in Georgia?
yeah, I'll be glad to. We're broken up into regions, and we were in the southwest corner. And like you said, it's a regional educational service agency. And really, to make a long story short, our job is to help roll out the initiatives of the State Board of Education and the State Department of Education. Um, so, um, each RESA, there are 16 RESAs in the state of Georgia, and each RESA has between 8 and 15 or 16 counties. And so in Southwest RESA, we had 15 districts, and by law, once a month, the board of control that is made up of each superintendent in your RESA, and you can remember when you were part of that, Jim. We by law we're supposed to meet once a month for a board of control meeting to discuss the issues of what's going on in our districts. And some superintendents are very vocal at times, but we run it just like a board of education meeting. It's an open meeting, and we have our 15 superintendents sitting around the table, and we have an agenda that we go by. We have a chairman and a vice chair. They pretty much run the meeting. And then we always will invite a guest speaker to come in and speak on some certain topic. A lot of times I would get people from the State Department of Education, but we're a service agency, and each RESA employs pretty much sometimes as few as 5 or 6 employees, or sometimes as many as like Metro RESA may have as many as 30 employees. Most of those employees are 49%. They've already they've retired from public education, and they're still wanting to work like you and I did. And so it's really a good situation, because the people that we're able to hire are not new, fresh people. They've been in education. They know the ropes, and they're really just good mentors and coaches for uh, for our systems. So I hope that kind of explained a little bit about what RESAs do.
Absolutely. And I remember very well that some of those 49 percenters you were talking about were extremely good in making bad news from the DOE sound a lot better than it really was.
Oh, absolutely. You nailed that one on the head.
Yeah. So how long were you director of Southwest Georgia?
Jim, I was there for 12 years. I actually retired in 2012, and I was there. The next thing I knew, 10 years had rolled by, and I went, "Uh, who stays for 10 years in a job, And I even stayed 2 more years before retiring. And like you said earlier, one of the reasons is I wanted to spend a lot more time with those grandbabies.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
so that's I was there for 12 years, Jim.
Now, what's your hometown, Tim?
I live in Cairo, Georgia, but I was born and raised in the Panhandle of Florida, over in Bonifay, Florida.
Oh, yeah. Well,
You know,
that's almost in Georgia, isn't it?
it's almost in Georgia, and went on to Florida State. And my first job, you're always, as soon as you graduate, you're looking for that job. And I got my first job in Brooks County, Quitman, Georgia.
Oh my.
And I stayed there 1 year. I was a football coach and PE teacher, science teacher, and I stayed there 1 year, and then I came to Cairo. And believe it or not, I pretty much have been here my entire career, serving as head football coach, athletic director, assistant principal, principal of elementary, middle, high school. In fact, Jim, really, I think you and I met when I was principal of Cairo High School,
You're right about that.
and you were principal of, was it Shaw?
Shaw, that's right.
Okay, man, I got a great memory on that.
We we had some great football games. I know that.
We sure did. We sure did. And so that's how I originally met you, Jim. And then I left the principalship and became an assistant superintendent in Houston County,
Oh my.
up in Warner Robins, one of the 10th biggest systems in the state. And you talking about a culture shock and change. It was a big one. And I stayed there 4 years and then went into retirement and came back to South Georgia as the RESA director. So that's kind of my pedigree there.
I had forgotten about Cairo, and just for those people that aren't from South Georgia and don't know, Cairo is spelled Cairo, and Houston is Houston, and it's a regional pronunciation, and don't you dare get it wrong.
You nailed that too. That's
It's it's sort of like knowing how to deal with gnats. It's just something you need to know before you even go there.
absolutely. It's not Cairo.
No.
It's not Houston. It's Houston and Cairo. Yeah,
Well, the same thing I had to learn the hard way goes for New Albany. It's not Albany, it's Albany.
that's it. That is it.
So, who were the people, Tim, that encouraged you to go into education?
Jim, no doubt was my mother and father. My dad he was a Baptist preacher for over 40 years, and my mother was a school teacher. And one thing that my mom and dad just kind of preached to all of us six kids is that, you know, hey, you've got to continue after high school. You got to go to college, and they just drill that in our heads. And I don't necessarily say that this day and age that you've got to go to college, and maybe we can address that later. But it was my mother and father, and also Jim, probably my head football coach. Because I was going to obey my father, okay, but if my head football coach asked me to do something, I was going to do it. If he told me to jump off the top of the gym, I was going to do that. Whereas I probably wouldn't have done that if my dad told me to do it.
What did your mom teach, Tim?
My mom was an elementary second grade teacher. She taught second grade and fourth grade.
Listen, there is no tougher job in the world than a primary education teacher. And you never get a bathroom break, and you've got maybe 15 minutes to eat your lunch while all your kids are sitting there watching, wondering why you eat so fast. Uh, I used to wonder why every early education teacher I knew wore a long dress. And it's because those grubby little hands wiped themselves on every teacher's dress right about the knees.
Yep. Yep. That's right. But all of my brothers and sisters, all of them were educators. All except one. There were my brother was coach and a principal, and my sisters, and all but one of us were educators. So I'm just kind of a chip off the old block, you know.
That's great. That's great. So, did you ever consider any other vocation?
You know, I really kind of thought that I might would like to be a veterinarian. And I just, I loved animals. And, but, I can remember the night we graduated from high school, me and all of my buddies, we went back to the high school, and we were sitting on the front steps of the high school, and everybody said, well, hey, what are we going to do next? And somebody said, well, why don't we go out there to the junior college? And so there were about 11 of us that enrolled in the junior college, and there were only about 3 of us that finished Florida State. So uh, several of us got pulled away, but I enjoyed going to Florida State and finishing there and getting my degree in education.
That's great. And when when you first started teaching, did you feel like you were prepared when you went into the classroom your very first day?
Oh, heck no, Jim. Golly, I mean, I was scared to death. And, I had all these pages and pages of lesson plans. And, I found out in a hurry, though, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Well, you hit that nail on the head right there. That's exactly right. It took me about 3 years to figure out what I didn't know, what I didn't learn in college. And and a lot of it was just common sense. Thank God for older teachers that were willing to take a few minutes and say, "Son, don't do that."
Yeah, I'll never forget one. My first principalships was at a real small elementary school in Grady County, Cairo. It was Shiver Element. Well, you know where Shiver's
Yep,
at.
sure
Yeah,
do.
right
Yep,
down the road from Pelham. And I can remember we were going to have our first, yeah, it was a PTO meeting. And I thought that the parents were just going to come in hordes, And we got there that night, and we only had about a dozen parents that showed up.
yep.
And I had an old elementary teacher that came to me, and she said, Mr. Helms, I'm not trying to tell you your business, but if you'll let one of these either kindergarten or first grade classes do a little skit and a performance at our next PTO meeting, we'll have a lot better crowd. and,
That's exactly
and
right.
Jim, it was packed. The auditorium was packed out the next week. The next time we had the PTO meeting.
That's great. That's great advice too. And one that every new teacher needs to learn the hard way, I think, or new administrator anyway.
Yeah,
Um, eh, I know you've been keeping up with all the news and education and everything, but what's your take on the elimination of the USDOE?
Jim. Uh, I have been trying to keep up with that, and it may be a little bit too early to tell, but as long, I've never been a big fan of the federal government telling states what to do. And so, and I know that everybody may not agree with that, but I like thinking that let the states decide how they're going to educate their students instead of all these adequate yearly progress and all these graduation tests. And so, as long as President Trump will allow that money to continue to flow into the states, I'm good with it. And our state is, and I guess one reason I like it is because the states are going to give a lot of that money to the local RESAs
Exactly.
and let the RESAs use that money as they see fit. If it's on literacy, or math or science, social studies, training up teachers, doing innovative things with leadership. So I'm kind of excited that we're going to start getting that money sent to the states.
There,
That's where.
there were two things that most people don't know. One is the enormous increase in the number of district administrators, especially over the last 15 years. I saw a graph from the USDOE, as a matter of fact, that the student population has grown something like 6% over the last 12 to 15 years. The number of teachers has grown about 7%, but the number of administrators, especially at the district level, has grown over 85%.
Holy cow!
Yeah, and then the other statistic is that only 25% of the billions of dollars the USDOE distributes, that comes from the states originally, by the way, goes to, benefit students directly. So that's 75% of those hundreds of millions of dollars that every state sends to the DOE that's going for something besides students. And I'm like you, I think that money can be distributed not just more equitably, but to benefit students to a greater degree if it's distributed through the state DOE.
Amen. A good way to put it, Jim. Maybe those dollars will follow the students more so than they have in the past.
I hope so. One of the things that I've noticed also is that school attendance zones are harming more students, I think, than they're helping. Um, I've always thought that if a parent wants to get their kid into a particular school in the same county, let them go.
I agree.
And all things being equal, if we use the competition factor, let parents decide where their kids want to go, then that might light a fire under some of these schools that may not be teaching students to read or do math the way they're supposed to.
I agree with that, Jim. I'm good friends. Since I live right down here on the Florida line, I'm really good friends with some administrators in the Tallahassee area, and they pretty much they just even though they've got 5 different high schools down there and just a scat of middle schools, they pretty much have open enrollment. Well, I say open enrollment wherever you want to send your kid, they can go as long as there are seats available. I mean,
Right,
you, you,
right.
you, you've only got 25 or 30 seats in the classroom, and as long as they've got seats available, they'll take kids from wherever in
Well,
Lee.
that's a great idea, and I also think that if we spend a significant portion of what money is available on hiring new teachers and lowering those class sizes, will go a long way toward recruiting more kids to become teachers. You walk in and you look at 28 or 30 third graders, that would scare the devil out of me, man.
Me too.
But anyway, so what do you think, Tim, is are the secrets to becoming a great teacher? Not a good teacher, but a great teacher.
You know, First of all, and I'm kind of going back to what we discussed earlier. It took me a while to kind of figure out that it's not just all. They're not just there to just soak up the education. And somebody told me early on. They said some of those students in your class uh, that possibly play basketball or baseball or football, if they're kind of if they're rambunctious in class, and if some of them act out a little bit, I had a person tell me, said, go and see them play in a football game, or go and see them play baseball or basketball, or go and hear them sing in the chorus. And then when you see them the next day in class, just kind of tell them, hey, I came to see you play football yesterday, and I saw you out there. You're on that offensive line, and you did a good job. And it's almost like magic. I mean, there's a connection there. That student says, Mr. Helms cares about me more than just in this classroom. He came and saw me play baseball yesterday. So
Yep.
I've learned that you know and listen, Jim. The other day I was down in Costco in Tallahassee, and I heard somebody say, "Coach Helms," and I turned around, and there was a young man that I had coached football uh, back in the '80s, and he was a police officer,
Oh man.
and he said, "Mr. Helms," his wife was there with him, and he said, told his wife, he said, "This was my football coach." And do you know what he taught me? And, I thought he's going to go into all this. Uh, he's going to explain about how I did a great job of coaching him in football. But he looked at me and he said, "You see this tie that I've got on right here?" He said, "Coach, you remember you told us that on Fridays that we had games, you wanted us to wear ties to school. And you taught me how to tie a tie." And he said, "And I still tie that tie the same way that you taught me." You know, and so it's just being a human and just being normal and not trying to be somebody that you're not. Uh, and the old Latin saying about in loco parentis,
Exactly.
taking the place of the parent.
Yeah.
You can never go wrong if you just love kids and try to look out for what's best for them in taking the place of the parent while you're there with them. You know?
That's great advice for any teacher, but especially a new one.
Yes, sir.
And I I know you run into kids like that all the time, that'll make comments like uh, what you mentioned, and usually it's something simple that you might not even remember doing, but they do. I was at a class of 1985 reunion um, a couple of weekends ago, and had a kid who was one of my band kids come up and tell me, he said, "Do you remember when I was going to drop out of school before my senior year?" And I said, "No, buddy, I don't." And he said, "Well, you you came to my house and you made me come because we had band practice before school started. And that kept me in school. And I finally graduated. And I didn't remember, but thank the Lord he did."
And I've got stories like that I could share too, Jim. And I mean, one that just uh, a young lady that was going to drop out of school in high school, and the guidance counselor told me about it, and I called her to my office and I said, "Time out now. You can." And the young lady was pregnant and she was going to drop out of school, and I said, "Look, you can still reach your dreams and your goals. You stay right in here with us as long as you can, but do not drop out of school." And just this past year, she called me and she said, "Mr. Helms, I am the I am the Grady County Teacher of the Year." And she said, "Would you write me a letter of reference to go in my portfolio?" And that I actually just kind of shed a few tears.
That's great.
She said, "You remember when you encouraged me that I was going to drop out, and you said, 'No, this will not define you.'" And she's our Teacher of the Year. So anyway, uh, I might not should have mentioned that on here, but it
No,
just
that's absolutely great.
it just brought tears to my eyes to know that she remembered that time that she was at a fork in the road, and I was maybe able to give her some advice about not dropping out of school.
that is wonderful. I am so glad though that high schools seem to have overcome that handicap we had for so many years about everybody must go to college. And
Abs-
you know, I, I've noticed over the last few years in retirement that handymen and plumbers and car mechanics make far more than you and I ever did, probably combined. And thank goodness there are people who have discovered that their calling in life is not necessarily college, but in serving other people in other ways.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jim. I used to pound into kids, you've got to go to college. You got to go to college. There's got to be another step. Um, but I don't. I mean, now I encourage them. Look, if you want to go to college, go to college. But if you want to go to a voc technical school, you go to that, or you get in the military. But you got to take that next step. And just like what you just said, before we got on this Zoom call today, uh, I've got a little four-wheel Kubota that I've got being serviced down here at the local tractor company, and they just called me and they said, "Okay, you can come pick your tractor up now." And they said, I said, "Well, what's the damage?" And they said, "Well, it's going to be $555." You know, and I thought, good heavens, and I thought, did y'all put a whole nother engine in there? They just did some minor repairs. So
Yep.
you're right. Just some of those good old boys that used to take those vocational shop classes, they can easily make six figures now. You're right.
Well, yeah, one other thing that I've noticed, and it seems to be, I haven't done an official poll or anything around the state, but it seems to me that we are beginning to see the some increases in parental involvement, not just in sports and school activities, but in student behavior in the classroom. And I see that as a positive. Have you noticed anything like that down around South Georgia?
Absolutely, Jim. One thing I didn't mention that I still do, I officiate Georgia high school football and baseball. And yesterday I officiated a baseball game. It was a single A game, but it was between two rivals. And those stands were packed. I mean, with students, with parents, with grandparents. And I just thought, this is great that they're coming out and supporting their children and their grandchildren.
Yep.
Uh, so, yes, I'm starting to see that more and more. And like you said, I know that's easy to say about a football game or a baseball game, but those parents, they want to know what's going on and to be a part of it. They do.
Well, I think that's a plus for teachers everywhere when that happens, and will go a long way toward stopping some of the behavior we've seen, for the last decade or so. Uh, the kids that are so out of control that they prohibit anybody else in the class from learning, and teachers were given very little power to deal with them, and in some cases, very little support from the administration as far as disciplinary support in classrooms. And I've always thought it was a shame that we let one people ruin the educational process, one person ruin the educational process in a class for the other 24 or 25.
Right. And I've always said this, Jim, back when you and I were in school, if if you saw a child in the office and some parents there, you knew that child was in trouble. But now, this day and age, if you see a child and parents there at a school, it's usually the teacher is in trouble.
Yeah,
It's all the fingers are pointing back on what that teacher didn't do.
right.
And so I'm glad that parents are starting to take a more active role. And if they can just realize, it takes us all working together. It takes a village to raise a child, as the old proverb says. And
That's
so
right.
I'm certainly glad to see that more parents are getting involved. I really am.
Are you seeing an increase in enrollment in vocational programs in
Ab-
South Georgia?
Absolutely, we are absolutely, and I mean, from vocational, from a small machine repair, auto mechanics, uh, electricity, carpentry, even culinary arts. I've seen a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
improvement in the culinary arts parts. Used to it was just what we call it, home ec classes.
Right, right.
Now a lot of schools have culinary arts programs, and those kids are helping with community projects and what have you. So yes, I've seen a big upgrade in vocational classes.
That's great. Now, Tim, what advice would you have for people, teachers that want to be, aspire to be an administrator?
Um, you know, I, Sometimes that worries me, Jim, because I see people getting into administration way too early in their careers.
Yeah.
I just really believe. I mean, and I know the way it was with me. I was in that classroom the first 8 years of my career. Even though I coached football, coached baseball, coached basketball, I was the FCA sponsor. Um, I just did a lot of. I was the Key Club sponsor, but that time in the classroom was so valuable to me in growing in my career because, like you said, I didn't have a clue coming out of college what to do as a teacher. That principal said, "Here's the keys to your classroom.
Yeah.
Your textbooks are down there in the book closet. Go and get started." And that was all I knew.
Yeah.
So, um, but my teaching career and then moving into as a football coach and an athletic director, that in decision making and working with parents and with booster clubs, that really prepared me in making the step into as an assistant principal. So
I think you're 100% right there. And, I used to tell kids that ask me about being an administrator, I say kids, young teachers and that sort of stuff.
right,
If you're not a great teacher, you're not going to be an even passable administrator because there's just too many things in dealing with people that you have to learn, sometimes the hard way, but you have to know how to deal with parents and kids and other teachers. And successful teachers have a knack of being able to learn that, over time.
that's right. And also, Jim, I learned this too, that everything is not black or white. There there are times that there are things that are gray, and that's okay. And
Sure,
I had to learn that it's not just everything is not black or white. There is gray decisions that have to be made, and that's okay sometimes.
sure. Well, Tim, listen, I appreciate you talking to me today. And I hope you enjoy raising those grandkids, even if they take all your money.
Man, we're loving on those grandkids, and man, we are planning the Easter egg hunt of all Easter egg hunts
Oh, that's great.
here for next Sunday. So if you want to bring your grandkids down to Cairo, we're going to have a big Easter egg hunt. Uh,
I
with,
can smell the vinegar from here, Tim. That's great.
absolutely, Jim.
All right, good to see you, buddy.
Good seeing you. I hope to run up on you and let's go out and eat sometime. Okay.
Sounds good.